Hello everyone and welcome to today's video, a preview look at the new Kickstarter board game Midhalla from first-time publisher West Games. Midhalla is a fully cooperative 1 to 4 player game, or up to 5 if you have the expansion, in which you will be delving into some dungeons, doing combat encounters and progressing the narrative story that the game throws over 12 total chapters. This is a version of the game where I managed to play up to chapter 3. So in terms of spoilers in this video, I'm going to keep it very, very light. I've only played up to chapter 3. There will be some images from the rulebook and things like that. But in terms of spoilers, we will not be talking about narrative. This will be very much a video focused on the mechanics. As with any sponsored content on my channel, I handpick things that I think are interesting for both me and hopefully for you too, that shares some common ground. So this being a tactical board game, kind of campaign elements to it, dungeon crawling, I think it has a lot of crossover with hopefully you guys who are fans of the channel. Also, I make sure to play every single game that I do before I want to do any sponsored content around it to ensure that I find the game actually fun. So kind of minor spoiler alert here, I do quite enjoy this game. So let's take a look at the game in action, but please be aware that this is a preview copy that I'm showing off here today that does have some kind of prototype components and won't be necessarily representative of the full and finished product. But without further ado, let us check out some Midhalla. Midhalla plays up to 5 players if you use the expansion, but it can be played solo as well, but you must control at least 2 characters. It is a fully cooperative story adventure game with tactical dungeon encounters that have very low levels of luck, which is music to my ears and what really piqued my interest to begin with this game. The easiest way to describe the game is that it's a mashup of narrative decision making, resource management, tower defense, tactical combat decisions, and some character roguelike elements too, where each chapter your characters have the chance to have different skills available for them to use. You will be delving through mystical dungeon gates, investigating a mysterious ancient stirring evil, laying traps to prevent monsters from destroying the gate, and collecting loot and leveling up as you go as well. Over the course of 12 chapters or sessions, you'll play through the saga of Hakon, a young warrior tasked with continuing the legacy of the town of Midhalla to protect the gates and thus the world from the evil in the dungeons below. Each chapter takes approximately 2 or 3 hours to complete depending on your player count, but also there are some randomized elements here for some replayability and some different decision making that will potentially influence the way that your campaign goes. Hakon is joined by their trusty companions and warband, who each have their own distinct traits and playstyles. Hakon himself is your classic warrior type with a shield and axe in hand. He's basically at home in the thick of battle on the front lines. Enyik is a mystical healer who is invaluable at keeping your team alive, and the healing goes a long way in this game. Also a very important character to the mysticism and some of the kind of more kind of magical elements to the narrative. Arn is the sneaky assassin character, great at killing monsters quickly and efficiently, and will often pop up in times of looting and being able to perhaps do some good things for your team in order with events and things like that, but certainly very good at traversing distance quickly and getting into the enemy backlines. Tora is an experienced tactician and can enable other characters powerful turns with their ally positioning actions, and can also heal the gate with their ultimate, which is also a very powerful and unique ability to be able to do so mid kind of gameplay. These are the 4 starting characters available that I have played with, but there is another 2 playable characters that you can get, think through the expansion or through other means, as well as there is an advanced version of each character on the flip side of the character mats that I believe unlocks later. I didn't have a chance to actually play really very much with these at all, just gave them a quick read. They all sound very interesting, but during my preview copy, I only had the first 3 chapters, so I didn't get to that part in the game yet. But it does look like the characters will have some nice progression there. Each character feels quite unique in their skill set, and certainly more useful in certain combinations together or against certain enemy types. I played this through solo, controlling just 2 characters initially, and in chapter 1 the game tells you to play with Hakon and Enyik on the very first chapter 1. If you're playing solo or just with 2 characters, there was just 2 of you. And they do seem to be, in my experience, the most solid, kind of reliable or easy team to execute, if you like. I have tried running Arn and Tora together and found that it is quite a bit harder, but they can still be very effective and you can definitely still win with that pairing. You just have to play in a slightly different style, which I found quite interesting. So you're not necessarily locked into having to play, but certainly there seems to be a bit of a sliding scale here of difficulty, or at least play styles that you might want to observe. The structure of the game, as I said, is split into 12 separate chapters, with an overall party sheet to help you keep track of your overall progress through the story and the campaign and through the chapters. The first 2 chapters act like a tutorial, easing you into the mechanics and teaching you as you play. When you get to chapter 3, that's the first time when the kind of training wheels come off and you get to put into practice a full scenario, if you like, putting into place everything that you've learned over the first 2 chapters. This, I thought, was a fantastic way to get you up and playing very quickly, which I super appreciated, and I think more games should definitely do this type of thing to get you kind of going initially and then add rules and layers to the rules as you go on. Each chapter will start with the setup phase and some narrative storytelling that will outline some goals for that particular chapter as you delve through the gate. Unlike many other legacy games, most items, resources, and abilities will actually reset for each character, with the exception of a few things that are noted on your party sheet. This also includes a level 1 skill for each character, which you get to draft new ones each time. You draw 2 plus the number of characters face up and collectively allocate 1 extra skill to each character's top skill line. This is the roguelike type element that I alluded to earlier, where you can set yourself up slightly differently each chapter, and then as the chapter progresses, you'll also get to draw and choose a level 2 and a level 3 skill as well. This can help you fill in some gaps you might be missing with your existing skills, or because you're only using certain characters or not all of the characters, but also lead to some good replayability and variety between the chapters, even if you are playing the same characters every single time. You also draw different items each chapter to add to some basic always available ones into your pool, which will also influence your playstyle through this particular chapter, giving you that ability to again fill in some gaps maybe that you don't have with your characters, or deal with a very specific enemy type that you might be aware is coming up in the chapter. Once setup is complete, you start the exploration phase, where you, as a team, explore the tunnels and taverns, revealing more narrative beats as you reveal new map tiles, placing them into the central dungeon grid. Each tile will match up to a number on the tile, and then you place the tile in that position in the grid. Each tile will also have a section in the chapter book, so you will go back to the campaign book to see what you need to do next. This will be potentially progressing the story of the chapter, perhaps, or maybe you get to draw a random event or something else might happen. Maybe you stumble across a sleeping bear or something like that. But there are lots of things that can happen to you during this phase. Some of them will be linked to what you are trying to achieve in this chapter, but some of them could also be just some little things that you stumble across as you adventure. This exploration will kind of continue until you trigger the preparation and then the next combat phase of the chapter. The preparation phase can be triggered at different times or in different ways, each one unique to the chapter that you are playing. It really depends on the order that you explore, the tiles that you flip, and the order in which you explore the dungeon, or it could be down to a timer that that particular chapter has. But whatever happens, you will trigger one of these preparation phases, which will then follow on with a combat phase. There will always be 3 of these preparation and combat phases in every chapter after chapter 3, I believe. So you will always be fending off in every chapter at least 3 kind of waves of enemies, if you like, through these preparation and combat phases. So in the preparation phase, you spend your resources, both silver, runestones, and trap components, to build traps, buy items, or fortify map tiles ready for the enemy assault on the gate. This is where the game really heavily draws on tower defense like games and mechanics, as you are trying to stop waves of enemies that are marching towards you and towards the gate, hoping to escape. You start with 3 fortified tiles, which is the gate and the 2 adjoining tiles, but fortifying more map tiles allows you to place up to 2 traps on them and also prevent enemies from spawning on that tile. So I found that a very good use of the runestones, which you can spend to do this. You cannot put traps on the gate itself, however. That would probably be a little bit too easy. Items in the shop can help fill gaps in your skills, but also give powerful effects. And traps are actually essential for dealing with the mass of incoming enemies. Your characters will simply just not be enough. You will need to use traps. I always found that a well-placed trap could easily output the same or more damage as a character can on their turn, depending on the level of trap, as you can also upgrade these to become more and more powerful. And you have lots of traps to choose from with different costs, different health, and different kind of attack effects and things that they do. So you're better off trying to mix and match these a little bit depending on what enemies you might have coming up, but also to try and not go all in maybe by only covering one of your flanks with a trap that can only do a certain type of thing. You're going to want to have to strategically place these traps so that hopefully they can be the most effective. Putting them across sections and things like that is also very powerful because they have more opportunity to hit more enemies. The traps you will build as well will likely be determined by your available resources, money, and trap components that you have, which you draw during setup, but also after each successful combat phase. So once you've done all of this, all of your traps are placed, tiles are fortified, and items purchased, enemies will then spawn on unfortified tiles, and then you can rearrange your heroes to the fortified tiles of your choice for where they will start, and the combat phase will begin. I'll briefly touch on the variety of monsters here, but there is a large amount of them, and each of them has unique traits, strengths, and weaknesses that you will need to strategize around beating. For example, the Draugr Horde is an undead horde enemy, which means each attack is always reduced to 1 damage due to its horde trait. But as it's undead, they also take damage from healing abilities. Each monster also has a preferred target, which will always try to perform its attack or abilities against. For example, the Cave Worm is solely focused on destroying the gate and has immunity to traps, so will always move towards the gate, ignoring your traps and even characters on its sole purpose to just attack the gate and get that gate destroyed as quick as possible. During the enemy turns part of combat, all enemies will attack if they had a valid target, or they will move 1 tile closer to the gate. If not, the game gives you a very simple to follow AI system for how the monsters will behave. This makes it very easy to predict enemy positions and plan accordingly for them. You can also work out how much damage they're doing because everything in Midhalla is done numerically. There is no random amounts of damage in this game. Everything is printed and does the amount of damage that it says. So this can be very easy for you to tactically work out when to take damage, when not to take damage, how to avoid it, when to take it, if you can heal it off. It also means that you can always tell if you're very close to death or not, and if you really need to move. So it leads for a very deterministic and very strategic low luck level of kind of combat encounter. So once the enemies have taken their turns, hopefully you're still alive and the gate is still alive, then your traps will have a turn to perform their ability, potentially attacking anything that is on their tiles. Then after your traps have taken their turn, then your heroes finally get to act. On your hero turns, you get to use skill selection discs to perform a top row skill first and then a bottom row skill, covering each with a disc, making them unavailable in the next round. This forces you to plan your skill usage carefully for future turns to ensure you have the right skills open to you, or at least the right combination of top and bottom skills that you have available. Each hero also has 2 ultimate abilities that can be unlocked after successful combat phases. These offer powerful extra one-time use skills that you must recover with a disc and exhaust after you've played them. But when things get particularly tricky, these are incredibly powerful and useful, and you will certainly want to combo these off at the right time when needed to just remove a very difficult enemy. The combat phase will continue and loop round to enemy turns, trap turns, hero turns, enemy turns, trap turns, hero turns, until, well, hopefully you've killed all of the monsters and the gate has been successfully defended. All combat in Midhalla is done with numerical values. There is no dice or randomness to killing the enemies, as I said before. The tiles the enemies spawn on will be the random element a lot of the time, which then gives you this kind of puzzle to beat and try to defend the gate as a team. Often you're going to have to prioritize certain troublesome enemies over others, and perhaps even rushing out into danger just to kill a ranged enemy might be essential for your team. Although really a lot of the time monsters will be trying to attack the gate. They also very often attack the characters, and of course if your characters or heroes drop to 0 health, you also lose. And there are some troublesome enemies, especially the kobold archer I found to be the worst defender here, who just kind of hangs around at the back, never moving any closer because they can always hit you with their bow attacks. So you're going to have to go out there and deal with it. So you can't kind of stay completely stationary on the starting tiles. You're often going to be forced into making a more aggressive move out into the kind of outer tiles of the dungeon. I have yet to get through a combat encounter completely unscathed. It is very likely that your heroes are going to take damage, your traps are probably going to end up taking damage, and probably the gate is going to end up taking damage. You have to be very lucky, I think, with the spawns and play pretty much perfectly, as the monsters will always outnumber you and your traps. Not to mention that the damage on the gate, your heroes and your traps doesn't even reset upon winning combat. So if the gate is low on health going into the third combat phase, for example, the win or loss of the entire scenario can be on a knife's edge at that point. And it can be very, very challenging for sure because of this, but it will reward good strategic planning and execution. And if you do manage to get through those first two kind of slightly easier, as I said, the combat kind of ramps up in difficulty through the 3 different kind of combat encounters that you have through the chapter. As it kind of ramps up, if you manage to get through the first 2 in pretty good state, then that will put you in a really good winning position for the third one. But if you're kind of on the back foot and all of your characters are on low health and the gate is looking very low health as well, going into that third encounter, it is going to be a struggle for you, but maybe still winnable. But you're just going to have to play your heart out and really not make any mistakes. Once combat is complete and all the enemies are dead, then you're going to get your rewards. This includes a lot of good stuff, but mainly getting an ultimate skill unlocked, which is going to be great for the next combat phase, new items in the shop, refreshing your used items if you used any during that particular encounter, but also getting the next level up skill. The level 2 skills are more powerful, but must be placed on the bottom row. This now fills out to players' boards with 4 top and 4 bottom actions. So you're going to have a little bit more flexibility there with the actions that you take, and certainly trying to get some actions that maybe you've always taken for granted on the top, on the bottom, or vice versa can be very good. And you can start to build a little bit of a combo of your different abilities there. The game then continues with the exploration phase again, adding more tiles to the dungeon until you trigger the inevitable preparation and combat phase again. And it's rinse and repeat like this as you progress the chapter narrative, and whether or not you're efficient or not in the way that you do this will depend on how many tiles you may have out. But by adding more dungeon tiles to the dungeon, you will be increasing the number of enemies spawned each combat. So a more kind of inefficient route where you're trying to min-max, maybe explore the entire dungeon, may actually come back to bite you, because you're going to be ending up having to deal with more enemies later on in additional combat phases. So perhaps if you want an easier experience, going and taking some of the hints as to where you need to go or the direction to go that the game sometimes gives you, perhaps go that way rather than kind of stumbling blindly through the dark trying to uncover everything. Because if you do, then that will make the game harder, because you will have more enemies to deal with later on. After you trigger and hopefully complete the next successful combat phase, you will get the level 3 skills, which these cover up an existing skill on either the top or the bottom line, depending on the icon printed on the skill. This means for the final combat encounter, you will be fully prepared with your level 1, 2, and 3 skills to face whatever it may be. The game has a host of mini and mega bosses to also face off against, and from my experience so far, they have been in the final wave of the dungeon as you kind of face them off. And they've been difficult in their own ways, unique, and certainly have different abilities that make you have to approach that particular combat phase in a different way. Once you've completed the chapter, you read the epilogue, marking everything on your party sheet that you're told to, and that then may mean that some stuff carries over from this particular chapter to future chapters, but not necessarily everything or every time. And there you have it. You have successfully completed a chapter of Midhalla. And as you progress through, more and more things will get unlocked. You will fill out your party sheet, and you will get deeper and deeper into the story, and you'll get more and more options with the different characters, items, and you will kind of get more traps to play with and things like that. But each chapter does have that core kind of mechanic, if you like, of exploration. Then you're going to prepare setting your traps. Then you're going to do combat, where you're going to be actually fighting off the waves of enemies, and then you're going to have your rewards leveling up, and you're always going to have that levels 1, 2, and then to 3 kind of action as you go through. That is going to be the core mechanic of every single chapter, but of course it is the narrative and the monsters and everything else that the game kind of throws at you that is going to be different each and every time. So my initial thoughts with Midhalla is that it is very, very fun. I really like the core mechanics that this game offers, and it feels quite unique, actually, to different things. In particular, I really quite enjoy the kind of roguelike element to it, in where you get your level 1 skills and your level 2 and then your level 3. Kind of feels like you're searching for combos there, and I think with all of the characters in play, if you were playing 4-player, you can draw even more of these skills, and then you can probably get a little bit deeper into them, deeper into the kind of deck of skills, and be able to maybe allocate them a little bit more cleverly. So I really like that idea. I think it makes it quite unique, and it's a bit odd to be like resetting your character so much between the different chapters, whereas most legacy games you wouldn't really do that. But that makes it quite interesting, because it means that you don't really have to worry about if you've made a mistake or if you've got something you didn't really want. It's like, it's okay, you know, you can just go again on the next scenario and change things up a little bit, and try and find ones that maybe work a little bit better or more in your play style. So I really like that idea. I think it's quite unique. I also really like the tutorial. This game does a fantastic job of teaching you the game. The first 2 chapters, I mean, there is a section where they say you need to read this element of the rulebook. So you go through and you read that kind of brief section in the rulebook. But apart from that, you basically don't pick up the rulebook. I think that's super good. I did come into this game already with some prior knowledge, because I had played it before I had agreed to kind of do my preview about it. But yeah, I found the tutorial super intuitive and very easy to follow. So it's a big thumbs up for me. And if you're somebody who maybe does struggle to get into these kinds of games, because perhaps the large rule books or kind of mechanics or anything like that kind of puts you off, it looks a bit too grand for you, this game does a great job of just sort of subtly introducing things as you go. And I think you'll find it very easy to just turn up on your very first session and just say, let's just learn the game together and play, rather than maybe needing to have a dedicated rules learner to begin with. You certainly want to just kind of go through it. And well, those chapters are part of the storytelling experience, right? So they fit in very nicely there. So that's another big positive for me. And of course, the main thing as well that I really enjoy is the puzzly tactical nature of the combat. You always know what the enemies are going to do. They do the same thing every turn. You know exactly where they're going to move. You know exactly the amount of damage that they're going to do. So it does make it incredibly puzzly, and a bit of a kind of push-pull risk-reward mechanic where you have to know when you're going to be taking damage. You have to kind of allow for some damage taking of your characters, your traps, and the gate at times. But then if you've got a plan to heal that damage off, or to kind of tie an enemy up maybe in some way so that they can't do any damage, or they're sort of stuck in some way, that's really good. And having that kind of knowledge all readily available to you, I think is quite an interesting part of the game for sure. In terms of playing the game solo, I found it very fun and great to play solo because of that very nature. But because of the very open information nature of this game, if you were to play this co-op, you're going to be able to see everything that's in play, really. So it's going to be much more similar to something like a Pandemic experience than it is so necessarily to a Gloomhaven-like experience, where you have some hidden information that kind of will inform your turn. It's very much open information, and players can work and teamwork it all out together. So there we have it. Those are my final thoughts and my preview for Midhalla. Thank you so much to West Games for sponsoring this video and giving me the opportunity to play Midhalla. It's a very interesting game, and you can check it out on Kickstarter probably right now, if this video is going live when the project goes live. But also I'll put a link down below to the Kickstarter if you want to check it out. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and thank you all so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.